It's so Washington to trade votes for stuff, saying, "Oh, put this in the bill and I'll vote for it," even though the underlying bill is terrible. They're going to vote for it because of coyote or wolf or whatever you're talking about. Just silly things. It's a mess, man. Let me tell you.
It's a mess. Yeah, no, exactly. What was notable, there was a vote agreeing on the resolution earlier in the day, whether or not they were going to allow it to get to the floor tonight, and that only passed by 2 votes. Only 2 congressmen allowed it to happen, and this was earlier in the day, like I said, when they were moving it on. So there was a good chance that this spending bill, had it not been whipped up, would not have passed. And that's because you've got people like Amash and Jordan and everything. There's actually a list of congressmen that voted against the the decorum on the bill, or whatever, the procedural vote. So it was a close vote. It was close. It wasn't a guaranteed pass or anything, and they managed to get it through, but with some notable people objecting. For instance, you had Justin Amash, Michelle Bachmann, David Bratt, Brooks, Paul Brown, Louis Gohmert, like we talked about, Steve King from Iowa, Labrador, Thomas Massey, and Steve Stockman from Texas as well, who voted no against letting it go to the floor. So they were trying to stay for the holidays and work out a better bill. And I think, and I don't know if Julie agrees with me or not, but I think it would have been better had they not bothered. Had they not, rammed this huge bill through.
Yeah, I mean, it was a close vote. I can't imagine what they were feeling because I know they were whipping votes to the last second trying to get people on board. So, yeah, I think they should have stayed. I'm sure they just want to go home, though, most of them, to be honest with you.
Exactly, and it's stuff like this that it calls into question a lot of the talking points that you hear out of Washington, and you can see who voted yes or no. I mean, that's all listed online if you want to look, see if your congressman voted for it or against it, and punish them or ask them what they were thinking. You can do that, but I think John Boehner actually had a press conference earlier today. I don't have the soundbite, but I'm just going to paraphrase what he said. He said this isn't what he wants to do. He would rather break the bill apart into 6 or 7 pieces and pass them individually, but he didn't think he could get that through the Senate. And so that was his excuse for that. And for those of you who listen to the Sean Hannity show or listen to Hannity on listen to Hannity on the radio, he had congressmen on after they were in conference about this, and the idea came up that there would be a continuing resolution possibly through February, like we were talking about, so that they could fund the government and then pass a quote-unquote better bill later on, or break it apart with McConnell in the Senate. And we played a clip last week of McConnell saying that he would rather break it apart and pass it in pieces with immigration. We're assuming that he would want the same thing for a budget, but that's not what happened. They opted not to do that, and instead went with this big bill, which is one of the chief things Republicans rail against Democrats for, is these massive, massive spending bills. And so it begs the question, why throw your stock in with the Republicans if they're going to keep acting like this? And you can see which Republicans were thinking of you and didn't vote for it, or voted against the procedure, and it speaks for itself. I mean, their actions are on record. So in tomorrow, we'll be able to see how the Senate does with it, and I guarantee you they'll probably pass it and complain about it the whole time, but it looks like we're pretty well stuck with what this bill is, and you're going to see more and more coming out tomorrow in terms of what's really in it, since nobody got the chance to read it. Now, Julie.
Yes.
I want to ask you, what do you think is going to come of this new Republican Congress in January?
It's a good question. Usually I'm kind of hopeless, to be honest with you. I try to be think of the bright side, but I don't know. I think a lot of people just think, oh, Republicans won the Senate, everything is going to be, oh, joyful, limited government, reducing spending, all that stuff. But, I haven't seen that from Republicans. I haven't seen Republicans who are willing to fight and actually, have principles. I guess we'll see. I'm afraid because I don't think they're actually concerned about, the NSA at all. We've seen leadership, not care about that issue too much, even though the majority of Americans do. I'm worried about foreign policy, stuff like that. The Republicans who say they're for limited government often are pro-war, pro-big government foreign policy. I'm also, I don't think they're really going to stick out their neck that much. I think there's a couple Republicans who will, but I'm not sure about leadership so much.
I agree 100%. I think that probably, like they said in the sound bites, you're going to have Republicans just trying to do what they can to get by in terms of just passing the bare minimum and then trying to have this fight on immigration. As we played in the episode previously, I think 2 episodes ago, Obama talking about his side of the immigration debate, saying, if you want something done, pass a bill. And so we're going to see a Republican bill come across and see what the president does with it. I personally, like Milton Friedman said, the American people benefit from divided government. And I think that we're going to see probably less benefit with the Republicans in control of both houses, because I think Obama's going to be forced to swallow hard and pass a lot of stuff. Most notably, I think, in this bill, which I want to talk about a little bit, because I know you're up and up on this, Julie, the fact that this bill, this spending bill, had a provision that blocked the Washington, D.C. voter mandate to allow recreational marijuana use. This spending bill actually blocked it. They said, yeah, we know you guys voted for it, but we don't like it, so fie on you.
Yeah, DC had a ballot on to legalize marijuana. 70% of DC voted for it, so overwhelmingly they voted to legalize marijuana in DC. But DC Congress is trying to overturn that. I know there's a Maryland representative, Andy Harris is his name. He's trying to overturn it because he thinks, oh, marijuana is bad, which I guess it is. I'm not a big marijuana smoker myself. I don't do it at all. But I think it's really a freedom issue. I think it's also a fiscal conservative issue, and I think it's a local issue. If you believe in federalism so much, if you believe in decentralization of power, which a lot of Republicans talk about, then you need to butt out of, a local DC issue. And the voters voted to legalize marijuana, so I think you need to respect that instead of trying to overturn it by a federal law.
I agree 100%. And as to this Maryland congressman and his thoughts on weed.
My point is...
Are you ready to be fucked, man?
Yep. That's a little bit of a thought there for you. And it's totally crazy to me. And I don't understand how Republicans who preach and preach and preach no big government, no federal mandates overruling the states. I mean, how many times do you hear the states' argument that it's, states need to decide things from gay marriage, and it's all good and fine when it's about banning gay marriage, but then when it comes to passing marijuana legalization, all of a sudden, the federal government needs to step in, and we need rule of law, and blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm. It's such hypocrisy there.
Exactly. It's totally hypocrisy. And I think probably the worst part in my mind is the fact that you've got DC with no representation in Congress for the most part. I mean, they've got no dedicated representative, no dedicated senator, and Congress is voting on whether or not they're allowed to have recreational marijuana use. And it's one of the few things they themselves, the actual voters, get to vote on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, am I out of line there at all?
No, you're right. 70% of DC voted for it. It's overwhelmingly popular, and here are people from across the country saying, no, you can't have that? I mean, that's ridiculous.
Exactly, and it's no different than if California votes on something and it starts affecting Texans. I mean, nobody wants a congressman or a senator or a president that's not representative of them, that they didn't vote for, telling them how to live their lives. So why then? I don't know why. I mean, Republicans would vote against something like that. I mean, I understand there's still a lot of misinformation about marijuana use, but if you look at the numbers in Colorado, for example, that passed a similar measure, you've got a murder rate in Denver that has dropped by 60% since marijuana was legalized. And just looking at that alone, the fact that these people that do enjoy marijuana are not having to deal with drug dealers anymore, they're not having to go to the underworld to get this plant, you're seeing less murder, you're seeing less crime in that aspect. And not only that, it's adding significant amounts of money, significant capital to the economy. I mean, it's good for the economy, and it reduces all kinds of taxpayer expenditures, all kinds of costs to the people.
Yeah, crime has dropped in Colorado significantly since it's been legalized. You know, I don't want my taxpayer dollars going to lock up, peaceful drug users, especially people who are smoking marijuana in their homes, just minding their own business. I don't want my taxpayer dollars going to that. And I think even among police officers, I've seen during like personal conversations, they saying that they think it's ridiculous that they have to arrest people for having a little bit of marijuana on them. They think that's outrageous. So even they're saying that we should legalize marijuana in private. I think we should.
I agree, and I think that when you look at the danger that a lot of officers have to put themselves through, I know here in McLennan County, Bell County area, Central Texas, there was an officer, I believe, earlier this year that was shot and killed during a no-knock raid of somebody that was growing marijuana, and that man's life would not have been in jeopardy had they not been trying to get someone on charges of growing a plant.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just senseless. And then looking at the amount of people that have their lives ruined because they wanted to get high, I mean, you can argue, well, you shouldn't have got high, but in the end, is it really worth it? I mean, what if we go back in time and look at the people's lives that were ruined by not being allowed to drink a beer? And it's the same argument. It's completely hypocritical to enjoy your beer and then deny somebody else a plant, especially one that has significant medical properties, significant medical attributes. I mean, there's like a 9-year-old girl that was in the news earlier this year who has chronic seizures, something like 290 seizures in a year. Soon as she started taking cannabis oil, it was reduced to 3. Mm-hmm. And when you look at that, just that one person, and think of all the people whose lives would be exponentially better. Cancer patients, people with all kinds of degenerative illnesses like rheumatoid arthritis, juvenile arthritis, epilepsy, any kind of seizure disorder, lots of neurological disorders, their lives would be better with marijuana.
Yeah, I can at least understand where somebody's coming from if they don't want people to use marijuana for fun. I've been there before. I used to be, anti-marijuana and stuff like that. So I understand the argument. They're afraid that people are going to ruin their lives and all that kind of stuff. But I do not understand people who are against medical marijuana, because I remember my grandfather, he went through chemo and he had zero appetite. It was so sad to watch, and to think of people just denying medical marijuana to him, who he was going to die. It's just I don't know. I just don't understand that argument. I don't think it's moral at all.
I agree, and I actually just lost my great aunt not a month ago, and she had a severe brain tumor, and her last few months on Earth would have been a lot better. She would have been able to keep food down and wouldn't have had as much pain had she been allowed to smoke medical marijuana. I don't